At dawn in Yosemite, Balin Miller grips sun-warmed granite hundreds of feet above the valley floor, climbing higher without a rope, his motion calm, his fate already written. The world believes he's in complete control, but the truth behind reveals how mastery and mortality can cross in a split second. How did a rising star reach this irreversible edge? Balin Miller grew up in Alaska, where the mountains weren't just scenery, they were the backdrop for daily life. His father, a lifelong climber, believed that the best lessons came from exposure to cold air and open space. Weekends meant early mornings, thermoses of hot chocolate, and the crunch of boots on frost. Balin and his older brother Dylan learned to tie knots before they could ride bikes. The family's rituals were simple but deliberate. Check the weather, pack the gear, trust your partner. Some days the boys would race up low crags behind their home, their father watching from below, calling out quiet encouragement. Dylan remembers his brother as a child who was always moving, always reaching for the next hold. He once said, "Balin felt most alive when he was climbing." That feeling shaped everything, from the way Balin approached homework, methodical, patient, to how he spent hours tracing the lines of distant peaks from the kitchen window. As a teenager, Balin started a habit that friends would later recognize. Before big climbs, he'd dust his cheeks with glitter, calling them his glitter freckles. He said it made him feel like a warrior heading into battle, a private ritual that set his mind for the challenge ahead. Alaska's wildness instilled in Balin a comfort with exposure and solitude. The silence of the backcountry, the unpredictability of weather, the long hours spent moving over rock and ice, these shaped his sense of what it meant to be prepared. In that landscape, risk was part of the rhythm of life, and safety depended on respect, not bravado. Those early years built the foundation for everything that followed: a quiet confidence, an obsession with detail, and a belief that mastery came from knowing both the mountain and yourself. By his early 20s, Balin Miller was already drawing quiet notice within California's climbing circles. His reputation grew not from spectacle, but from a pattern of relentless, almost scientific practice. Friends described him as the kind of climber who would spend hours on a single pitch, repeating sequences, tweaking footwork, and memorizing subtle features of the rock until movement became instinct. He documented each session in a battered notebook, recording temperatures, friction, even the way his shoes felt on different types of granite. Miller's approach echoed the rehearsal culture that was taking root among elite soloists in the mid-2010s. While some climbers relied on improvisation, he was methodical, treating every ascent as a problem to be solved through preparation. On big wall routes, he would first climb with a rope, mapping out every placement, every move, and every possible hazard. Only when he could visualize the entire climb from memory would he consider tackling it alone. This discipline set him apart, especially on routes where a single mistake could mean the end. His solo achievements became benchmarks in their own right. The climbing community took note when he completed a roped solo of Denali's Slovak Direct in Alaska, one of the hardest alpine lines in North America, and later, technical solos in Patagonia and the Canadian Rockies. His standing as a purist and a planner was sealed, not by bravado, but by the quiet precision of his craft. Sea of Dreams on El Capitan was never just another tick on Balin Miller's list. By 2025, the route had become the measure of everything he valued: precision, endurance, and the ability to stay calm in the face of real consequence. At nearly 2,400 feet, Sea of Dreams is a wall that demands respect. The original ascent in 1978 set a new standard for boldness, with long stretches of marginal gear, expanding flakes, and almost no ledges to rest on. Even among Yosemite's hardest climbs, its reputation for danger stands apart. For Miller, that was the draw. He'd spent months studying trip reports and route topos, tracing every pitch in his battered notebook. Friends recall him poring over diagrams, marking out where heads might blow or haulbags could snag. The psychological challenge was as important as the technical one. Sea of Dreams is notorious for its long, thin seams and mandatory hook moves, sections where the only thing holding you to the wall is a sliver of metal and your nerve. For a soloist, every step upward means carrying all your gear, managing the rope, and solving every problem alone. Miller was drawn to that kind of isolation, where every decision mattered and every mistake had a cost. He told his brother that success on Sea of Dreams would mean more than any summit photo. It would be proof he could control the uncontrollable, if only for a few days. The route became his single focus, the line he measured himself against, and the last project he would ever start. Sunrise on El Capitan brought the kind of weather climbers hope for: crisp air, a pale blue sky, and not a hint of wind across the face. Balin Miller moved upward in a steady, unbroken rhythm. Each placement was deliberate, each motion measured against the unforgiving logic of the wall. The granite felt almost warm under his hands. Friction perfect. The holds familiar after days of careful rehearsal. His breath was even, his pace unhurried. Hauling his gear alone, he managed each transition with the same calm he'd shown on icy Alaskan ridges and storm-lashed spires in Patagonia. Pitch after pitch, Miller's movements traced the invisible line of Sea of Dreams, his shadow stretching across the blank stone. Below him, the valley floor fell away in silence. There were no crowds, no distractions, just the steady clink of gear and the quiet certainty of a plan unfolding exactly as intended. For hours, nothing interrupted the flow. No slips, no second guesses, only the relentless upward progress of a climber at his absolute best. Above the last anchor, the wall lost its cracks and edges, turning smooth and pale in the afternoon light. Miller clipped himself in, checked his system, and leaned back to begin the short rappel, just enough to reach the haul bag that had snagged below a shallow roof. The rope ran clean through his device, no knot at the end. He moved with the same measured control that had carried him up thousands of feet of blank stone, his weight shifting as he lowered himself into space. But the end of the rope, hidden by the overhang, came sooner than he expected. There was no warning, only the sudden absence of tension as the rope slipped free from the device. In a fraction of a second, Miller was falling, the granite rushing past in silence. There was no chance to catch himself, no ledge to break the fall. A single oversight, buried in the routine of 100 careful decisions, erased all margin. The wall that had been his proving ground became the last thing he touched. News of Balin Miller's death traveled quickly through the climbing world, landing with a heaviness that lingered far beyond the walls of Yosemite. In the days that followed, online forums filled with debate. Some questioned the boundaries of risk. Others defended Miller's preparation and intent. Arguments flared over whether his accident was the result of recklessness or the unavoidable cost of pushing limits. At the base of El Capitan, chalk marks began to appear on the stone. Initials, quiet messages, and lines drawn from Miller's own journal. One phrase, scrawled in block letters, stood out among the tributes. "Fear is the signal that you're alive." For many, these simple gestures felt more honest than the headlines and live stream clips that followed, which sometimes blurred the line between tribute and spectacle. Miller's family, still reeling from loss, spoke of their discomfort with the public gaze, how coverage sometimes missed the person behind the story. In the silence that settled over the valley, grief took on new forms: a handful of chalk, a few words left on granite, the ache of unfinished conversation. Balin Miller's death on October 1st, 2025, was documented by park records, eyewitness accounts, and climbing media. He fell while rappelling after a rope solo ascent of El Capitan's Sea of Dreams. Contrary to early reports, there is no evidence he died during a free solo of Snake Dyke or any other route. The accident occurred after a successful climb, when a routine task turned fatal. Although Miller's skill and preparation were never questioned, the precise cause of his rappel failure remains unclear in official documents. Some gear was recovered and photographed, but not all details have been released. As the record stands, one slip or oversight can define a legacy, no matter how prepared the climber.